In this video, we're going to explore the certainty of conscious, sustainable fun as a pinnacle, as an ultimate expression of every human being's innate drive and desire to feel sustainably good and avoid feeling chronically bad. And we're going to look at this within the ego, without the ego, and in the transition between the ego. So all pain, the foundation for feeling chronically bad, is the separation from and longing for something particular. If you are a human being with a body, and a finger is severed from the hand, there is physical pain. There is a separation from, the finger is separate from the whole, and a longing for the wholeness, the integrity of the system. Now, in psychological pain, there are two forms. There's the egoic form that is the separation from what we desire. I want to be with so-and-so. I want to have so-and-so, but I don't have so-and-so. I am not present with so-and-so. And so there is psychological pain, a separation from and a longing for. And so we have psychological pain. At the deeper level, we have the separation from self, the separation from the whole, because at a deep scientific and energetic level, and by energetic I mean biological, mental, emotional, on any dimension that you measure, reality functions as a deeply interconnected ecology. Meaning, if you do the science carefully, you can make a connection between this fingernail and every atom in the universe. If you do the science carefully, you can make the connection between this feeling and everything that exists in the universe. If you do the science carefully, you can connect this thought, this belief, to everything that exists. Because in an ecology, everything is in relationship with everything. Now, in order to see that clearly, we have to transcend chauvinism. In a binary system, masculine and feminine, black and white, up and down, in a binary system, you have zeros and ones. And the chauvinist wants to make an unscientific case that the ones are more important than the zeros, that the dots are more important than the space between the dots, that the words are more important than the silences that surround and shape the words, that men are more important than women, that masculine is more important than feminine. Now, when you delete half of the equation or take it out of focus in a binary system, you do not have a whole system. It doesn't actually work. It is an illusion. Within the tenets of chauvinism, the elevation of the ones relative to the zeros, the men relative to the women, thoughts relative to the feelings produced by those thoughts. In a binary system where you take half of reality and devalue it and elevate the other half, you can create the illusion of separation. because you just don't pay attention to the space that connects all objects, to the silence that connects all words, to the black that highlights and frames all light. But it doesn't work scientifically. Bigoted, chauvinistic systems require a cult dogma which is profoundly unscientific, meaning you must ignore vast amounts of data to maintain a cult dogma, including chauvinism. The pain of separation of the ego within a cult framework that feels isolated, alone, abandoned, unloved, helpless, uncertain, lonely. The isolated ego is an identity of separation from its ecological framework, emotionally, mentally, energetically, biologically, electrically, at every level of science, meaning the actual observation of relationships. That's all science is. It's the observation of relationships to a level of sophistication which allows us to predict habitual interactions between one form of energy and another form of energy with relative accuracy. And if you look at the study of cycles, the way that seconds are within minutes, and minutes are within hours, and hours are within days, and days are within months. And if you look at the study of cycles, there are intersections with any cycle from time to time that interrupt the cycle. No cycle is perfect for eternity because it's part of other cycles, cycles within cycles. If you look at the buildup of matter, you have one form of energy that's vibrating like this in relationship with another form of energy that's vibrating like this, and they form an atom with vast amounts of space in between. And then you take a planet Earth that's vibrating like this, and a sun that's vibrating like this, and you put it together and you have a solar system. You take this solar system and this solar system that's doing this thing, and you have a universe. And you take this universe and this universe, and you have a multiverse. These systems go on and on at different zoom levels, at different fractal lens focuses. If you zoom in this closely, you see the pattern repeating at this scale. If you zoom out, you see the same pattern repeating at this scale. And it's not completely perfect. And one pattern interacts with another pattern, interacts with another pattern, interacts with another pattern on every dimension of existence. We have interconnectivity. We have integrity. We have integration. We have relationship. And the question is that a relationship of pain? Or is that a relationship of love? Is that a relationship of well-being, of ecology, of dance, of sustainability? Or is that a relationship of violation, of domination, of fear, of isolation? Are we becoming connected to a world in which we feel sustainably good? Or are we connecting to a world that is chronically bad? And separation from and longing for wholeness, love, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. This is the other form of psychological pain that we experience. We experience psychological pain when we long for a sense of home, for a sense of connectivity, for a sense of meaning, for a sense of purpose, and at the same time, the cult dogmas in which we participate isolate us in the illusion of separate individuality from all that's going on, from all of the self that is larger than the egoic dot, which plays a role in building, which is inextricably connected to all that is. We have pain in the separation from and the longing for, and we yearn for integrity. We learn for the beauty, the truth, the goodness of becoming part of something bigger than the individual ego, than the dogmas of the cult in which we each participate. The root word of culture is cult. And there is some part of every cult, there is some part of every culture that is scientific, that correlates with well-being. And then there is some form of every culture that is cult-like, that is self-referential, meaning it does not connect with the larger universe. It does not connect with science. It does not embrace all of the data. Instead, this part of humanity, this part of the cult, references itself. A kid asks, "Why do I learn algebra?" "Dad, you never use algebra. Why do I have to stop playing and go and learn algebra?" And Dad has no answer. He's never used algebra a day in his life. But he says, it's what you have to do. The kid says, "Why? Why do I have to do this?" He says, "Well, it's what has been done before. We do it because we did it, and we did it because it was the right thing to do, and I don't want to think about it, and just do it because that's the thing that we do in this cult to cohese, to maintain the cult identity, as distinct from this other cult that does, why do they have to dance like this and do their beads like that and not like that? Well, we did because we did it before. And there's a part of every culture that is cult-like, that is self-referential, as opposed to referencing the larger environment in which it is a part, as opposed to referencing the direct equation of intelligence, which measures the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. There is pain in every cult. There is pain in the illusionary separation of the individual identity from the whole. And there is a longing, an innate longing, to heal that pain, to restore that illusion, or to break free of the illusion and restore the perception of the interconnectivity that is innate at every level of reality, but has been severed by the chauvinistic dogma of the cult, that has allowed, has tolerated, has encouraged certain strains of awareness that emphasize individuality and separation, and has cut off certain strains of awareness and consciousness that elevate our connectivity. Because you cannot dominate, you cannot prosecute a war on yourself from a position of sanity and intelligence. You have to first separate this me from this me. You have to artificially go in and say that this part of reality has nothing to do with this part of reality. And therefore it's okay to damage the host body of which we are a part in order to benefit this or this that is us. It's okay because there's a separation. But that separation is cultural, is dogmatically maintained, because you cannot scientifically find the isolation between a human individual and the planet upon which it resides. At every single facet in the concept of life, there is interconnectivity between one human being and another. And you just have to see this, with a little bit of imagination. If one human being was capable of infecting themselves with a disease, mentally, emotionally, or physically, that was so virulent that it spread upon all contact, a mental disease spreads through language and thoughts. An emotional disease spreads through mirror neurons and empathy. A physical disease spreads through air, liquid, variety of ways in the body. But there are diseases that are so virulent that upon contact, the other person becomes a carrier. Now, all human beings have some contact with other human beings. So if one person was able to cultivate such a virus, a mental, emotional, or physical virus, such that the entire species was connected, was infected, you have potentially the end of the species. So you have connection between the individual on the dark side similarly. If one individual introduces a technology that is viral in nature, that creates the end of all suffering, you have the liberation of a species. So you have interconnectedness between people and people. There's absolutely nothing in this space that does not have more to do with other people than myself. Meaning, if we look at this tableau, every single thing in this space has more to do with other people than myself. This body has more to do with my mother and father than myself. This turtleneck has more to do with millions of people in the garment industry and transportation industry than me. There's nothing. The technology industry that introduced the phone that's filming this, the blackboard, the English language, it all has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with an interconnected series of cultures over tens of thousands of years that invented ideas, that elevated certain ideas more than others, that invented layer upon layer of technology. And yet, despite this inherent truth in any interaction, that most of it has little or nothing to do with the individuals involved, our cult has flipped that reality into the dogma of the individual that says that I'm me and have nothing to do with the millions of people who invented clothing, who refined the looms that weave clothing, that invent dyes, that harvest clothing, that grow cotton, that secure the land that grows cotton, that secure the water that waters the cotton on the land that grows cotton. You can ripple out and you've got a multiverse in no time that has little or nothing to do with the individual energy essence that's here, other than that I am the one that resides in this body, produced by my parents, produced by my grandparents, produced by my great-great-grandparents, produced originally by the indigenous Africans some tens of thousands of years ago. Produced by what? How can we not see the interconnectivity that is the underlying fabric of every moment? It takes a stunning level of magic to vanish most of reality away in order to sustain the tenuous threads of cult dogma that most of us reside within in the prism and prison of our beliefs, which are not ours at all. They've been evolved in the minds and bodies and agendas of our cult, of our culture, for thousands of years, and are handed down to the infant before they have the discernment to separate the dogma from the underlying science. Now, in the inevitability of sustainable conscious fun, and the inevitability of transcending those limited words, there are a couple of factors at work. Now, the ego is alive in language because the ego is alive in thought. And thought is the interpretive medium through which feelings and sensations are processed. You know, when you get a slap on the back, is that rude? Is that obnoxious? Is that unnecessary violence? Or is that a friendly welcome? The mind decides what that is. When something happens in your life, is that a tragedy or is that a wonderful thing? The ego decides. And the ego decides through language, which holds the space for paradigms, for thoughts, for beliefs. Now, we're coming into the domain of a system, of a pattern of habits. Now, we start with the unconscious whole, the totality of the possibility field. But in order to have distinction, you have to delete large portions of the whole in order to create differentiation, to have distinction. If table sounds exactly like table, which sounds exactly like table, you haven't gotten three ideas. See, table sounds different than chair. and different than carpet, now you've got three ideas. But these are three illusions. The illusion is that the table is separate from the chair and the chair is separate from the carpet. But in fact, they are also, like the ego, part of the interconnected energy field, part of the whole. Now, consciousness begins with simple systems. Human consciousness is predicated on human thought, which is predicated on human language, which is gifted or rammed down our throat by the cult in which we participate. When you have a binary system, all you have is black and white, good and bad, good and evil. But binary systems gradually lead to the rainbow colors in between. The binary system becomes the trinary system because now you need a middle ground. The polarities create the middle in the awareness of opposites. Every binary system is a system of polarity, meaning this is one extreme, this is the other extreme, and the extremes give birth to space. The space between the extreme, the black and white, gives birth to the rainbow that exists in the polarity of the two extreme colors. And the question is, how fast can consciousness integrate and keep up with the distinctions that are born in polarity? And there's a resistance to the chaos, to the multifaceted wonder that we find ourselves getting lost in, because there are just so many infinite colors. A computer refracts the color spectrum into 256 million colors. We can't remember more than 50 of those 256 million colors, unless we are artists that work with shades of color for decades. So we cannot remember, put back together. We cannot become aware of, we cannot put into language 256 million colors. But 256 million colors are a drop in the bucket of the totality of just one spectrum, the color spectrum. The color spectrum can be broken down into 10 trillion distinct colors. And it doesn't stop at the limits of the observing and measuring device of the human eye. The observing and measuring device of the human eye sees a very narrow bandwidth of energy in a language called color. And you can take one shade of yellow and another shade of yellow and bifurcate the gradations between them 10 trillion times. It's just that we lack the observing and measuring sensitivity with the human eye to notice the difference, and so we're not going to sweat over whether the house should be painted 2 billion in one yellow or 2 billion in two yellow, because we can't even tell the difference. We might even not be able to tell the difference with a 100th gradation change from one yellow to another yellow. We may not be able to tell the difference between a 100th gradation and a differentiation of sugar, because we're dealing with what's seen or what's experienced as a low level of consciousness. When we talk about high and low in this sense, we're dealing with crudeness in distinction. If you can tell the difference, remember the story of the princess and the pea, right? She was a real princess because under 10 mattresses she could tell if there was a single pea. Well, we're talking about a high level of consciousness. Whether or not we put the cultural overlays of values and on top of that story, if you can tell the difference between a billionth increment on the color spectrum, between this type of red and this type of red, that's 1/billionth different, you've got a higher level of consciousness, which means that as you experience the world in color, it will be amazing, technicolor, brilliant. The current human mind could get lost in just how big the color language is. If we had 2 billion words, we could get lost in just how big the verbal language is. If we could tell pressure sensitivity in a massage to even the 1,000th level, where a masseuse could dial in the exact same massage at 1,000th greater pressure, and the client would know it. And we could talk about, I'd like this massage at 988 pressure. No, today I think I'll do 987. If the masseuse was able to track that metric along with the client, we'd be dealing with an order of magnitude increase in consciousness, in sensitivity. We're not at that point. Now, we enter systems from the totality of the possibility field, and we cut them in half. We turn them into black and white, up and down. A binary system. We move towards the triangle. We move towards the square. Now, the circle has a grace, an elegance. We use wheels for a reason for our vehicles. It is the most graceful. The least energy expenditure is spent turning a wheel. If we turn a square, or an octagon, or a hexagon, or a dodecahedron, every single one of those shapes takes more energy to transport energy than the sphere, than the circle. We start off with the grace of the circle. And as we enter the egoic consciousness through thought and language, we enter crudely. And it's like being in a vehicle with lines for wheels, with watermelons for wheels rather than spheres for wheels. And so there's friction. When you progress around the circle, around the sphere, as a circle, there's no friction. There's grace. There's intelligence. There's efficiency. As you progress around the circle through a triangular system, at each one of these points, it's pretty easy along here, but this is a hard corner to turn. Try turning a car at this angle, at that sharpness, at high speeds. It's very difficult. You hit a wall there, you bumble around, and then you head off in this direction. You hit a wall, you bumble around, you head off. That's a triangular system of energy. It's pretty bumpy. And so what happens is consciousness goes through a journey of evolution through pain. As we enter the illusion of separation of the ego, there is pain, the separation from and the longing for the integrity, the wholeness. And pain leads to awareness. For example, after a few times going around this triangular circle, you say, I bet we're getting ready for another shake-up and chaos coming, right? If you're driving along at 50 miles an hour and you hit a wall here, and you have to dust up, repair the car, turn it around, then head off here. You go along great for another 50 miles an hour, and then boom, this is tough. That shock, that energy is a wake-up. It's pain that wakes you up. You got to do something different because this hurts. And we have an innate drive to feel sustainably good and avoid feeling chronically bad. And so we say, well, I wonder, the angle of transition is determined by the simplicity or complexity of the geometric pattern of the system. So this is a very sharp angle to try and turn. As you go to a square, it becomes more open. Now, the more open the angle, a plumber will tell you this if you send water through pipes. Every 90 degree angle that you intercept, you inject into a plumbing system, reduces the amount of energy that flows through the system. If you put enough 90s in an infinite section of 3/4 inch pipe, no water will come out. Because if you start off with 60 psi, 60 pounds per square inch of water, and you put a 90 in, now it's 59 inches, or 59 psi. You put another 90 in, another 10 feet, and another 90 in, another 10, and eventually you don't have the pressure to force water to go through all of those awkward turns. So nothing comes out. It doesn't function as a system. And the same is true with life energy. You take the totality of life energy and first of all, you force it into a small domain of dimensions, where it just fits within physical senses and within this narrow bandwidth, and then, comes together in this way and that way. You do that, and it diminishes the energy, creates perceived isolation, and then you do it more and more and more, and it takes energy out. It becomes painful. And so the movement is to expand the system, to increase the complexity. If I had to be between this position and this position, it's a bit violent. If I can do it as a graceful movement in which thousands, millions of positions of muscles and blood, etc., transition for this one shape, now it's graceful. You have a binary system, you have a system of grace, you have a system of increased complexity, leading to increased grace. So the triangle involves to the square. The square involves into, you cut off the edges of the square, and it becomes an 8-sided shape, a 16-sided shape. And the innate guidance of wanting to feel sustainably good and avoid feeling chronically bad leads us back to the sphere, but through the gradations of distinction in language, so that we can come back to the totality of grace, the totality of what is presently the unconscious mind, the unconscious awareness of our interconnectivity with all that is, and know it for the first time. To come back to where we began and know it for the first time, only this time through language, this time through distinction, this time through the lens of egoic consciousness. And so that's the journey into and out of systems. The other journey is transcendence. When we die, we transcend the system of cult, the system of body, the system of electricity. None of the energy in our body disappears. Physicists will explain that no energy is created or destroyed. One energy becomes another form of energy, becomes another form of energy, becomes another form of energy in the breath of life. In the breath of life. One form of energy, oxygen, becomes carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide becomes oxygen. In the breath of life. Death transcends the system. We return to the whole. We're closer to it. Healing comes from the root word wholeness. When you cut and sever a finger from the rest of its ecology, there is pain. To heal the pain, we restore the separation by reconstituting the whole. So you have a movement. You have a movement towards healing, towards wholeness, which is the movement to heal the geometry of rigid distinction and separation, to return to the infinite parts of the circle that are the space, the feminine, the infinite parts of the circle which are the space in between the lines, the silence in between the words. When that becomes as conscious as the masculine, as the line, as the distinction, we have complete immersion in consciousness. We restore the isolation of the separated mind. As we restore through death, through healing, through love, through birth, because nothing is destroyed, nothing dies, it takes a different form. We put this body out in the soil. We could say, oh, it's a dead body. We could say it's a body giving birth. This body laying in the soil would give birth to as much life as was lost. As it becomes plants, that becomes butterflies feeding on those plants, that become pollination in other plants. Life is the story of change and transformation. So death leads to birth, healing leads to love, love leads to healing. As we transcend the isolation, the wound of the cult, that part of a culture that is not scientific, that is not intelligent, that is cruel and self-referential in maintaining a barbaric system, simply because it's the identity of the cult that gave rise to that system. We lead towards beauty, towards wonder, towards goodness, towards rightness. Because as we integrate with the whole, as we become as one, we heal the divisiveness between ourself and the totality that is. And in doing so, we eliminate pain, the separation from and the longing for. Now, fun is one of the few self-referential values that we all understand. When you ask someone, a good American, do you want to be free, right? Well, of course, I want to be free. Well, free to do what? Free to hurt yourself? Free to waste away your day in front of a TV with potato chips? What's the freedom for? Why do you want to be free? I want to be free because that's our identity. That's our cult, right? The land of the free. I want to be part of that. Well, most values, power, freedom, discipline, mastery, whatever it is, lead to another value. I want to be free. Why? Because I never want to be dominated and stuck in pain again. So it's not that I want freedom for its own sake. I want freedom so that I can get out of pain next time I'm in it. I don't want to be imprisoned in pain like I was before. I want freedom. What? From pain. I want freedom to explore and find myself. What? So that I can be, what? Happier. Why? Because happiness is fun. Happiness is fun. So we're moving towards fun as the ultimate value. I want to be happy. Why? Because it's fun to be happy. It feels good to be happy. So every human being in the history of humanity has wanted to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. Now, when you have twisted beliefs, such as no pain, no gain, well, you may want to feel worse, but the reason you want to feel worse within the paradigm of no pain, no gain is so that you can feel better later for longer, right? The reason you sacrifice lattes, right, in order to save up to buy a house is that the house will last longer than the latte. So once I get the house, then I'll feel sustainably good. The house will last long. If I could just keep drinking lattes all my life, but then that's all I'd have. So I want to feel sustainably good and avoid feeling chronically bad. That's what I want. That's what every human being has wanted throughout time. And so, in the paradigm of no pain, no gain, then I want pain. Why? So that I can gain, right? I want to bully you, which doesn't feel good, so that you won't sleep with my best friend, which does feel good, right? So in convoluted pathways to well-being, there's all kinds of long-term or short-term suffering that we create or can endure for a greater good, right? I'm going to, I miss you terribly, but I'm not going to speak to you for a week because you, scared me in this way, because I want you to learn through pain not to do that again, and then we'll have a happy life together, right? So I'm going to inflict pain to mitigate. I'm going to teach my dog, right? I'm going to hit my dog. Don't do that when they run out in traffic. Why? Because I want the dog to avoid dying, and then I don't like hitting my dog. But if I hit my dog enough that he learns some discipline and doesn't get run over, then we'll have a happy life together. Well, there's a whole, in the continuum of evolution. First, you have pain teaching you about pain. Then you have pain teaching you how to not have pain. Then you have pain teaching you how to enjoy, how to love, how to explore its opposite. And then you have love teaching you how to love. And then you have joy teaching you how to heal. You have a continuum in evolution from pain teaching you about pain, to pain teaching you about love, to love teaching you about love, which obviously on the intelligence equation is a higher level of awareness. I had an employee who I would ask, why aren't you doing this? You understand that this is damaging your relationship and blah, 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 and I can't give you a raise. And he said, I know. He said, I'm very stupid, but I need something to hit me over the head hard. Now, once I experience a disaster, then I change, and then it'll be wonderful. And it's like, well, I don't want to be your disaster. I get that you need that. And I get that I could shout and scream and all that. And maybe that would create enough pain for you to remember to do this and do this. But it's kind of a boring way to grow. But it was what he needed. And sure enough, because I didn't want to bludgeon him over the head, I would fire him from time to time. And miraculously, he would change that one thing, and that would be gone, because the pain of losing a job and all that, would come up, and I'd be like, thank you for changing. I'm just, how boring for both of us that I need to fire you, and you have to go through the panic of being fired in order for you to do this simple adjustment. But that's a level of growth. Growing through pain and fear. Well, if you grow enough from pain and fear, you don't create pain and fear. Meaning, if pain and fear teaches you to make a good espresso, right, because you don't want to lose your job, and now your customers love your espresso, well, you don't need pain and fear anymore. So now you've got joy. Now, can joy teach you how to have even more joy? It's an inevitable continuum. Pain leads to awareness. Awareness of pain leads to discipline. The discipline of, I don't want to do that again, right? I never want to have someone controlling my life. Well, okay, how am I going to do that? Well, I guess I'll have to get a job. I'll have to discipline. Pain leads to awareness. Awareness of pain leads to discipline, which leads to mastery, which leads to new behaviors that create less pain, which lead to success. Success at what? Success at creating sustainable goodness, of feeling sustainably good. So the path of pain inevitably leads to well-being over time with enough experimentation, right? Just, throw out the dice a billion times. We keep at it with that underlying drive of every human being wanting to feel sustainably better. Maybe we go down revenge, right? We try doing all this, and it feels great, right? Because we have power. But then it's kind of hard. It's like, all I have is the power to hurt this person. It's not it, I want this, and I want this. I have the power to create money, but that's not what I really want. I want to feel sustainably good. Well, there's all these areas that, whether I'm in Milan or whether I'm in Thailand or whether I'm in San Francisco, that's not it. There's something in my mind, something inside. I want to feel sustainably good. What do I have to do? Maybe I have to meditate, right? Learn the discipline of thought. Does it work? Oh, now I'm feeling worse. I'm not seeing all these horrible thoughts I was paying attention to. I don't want to meditate. Maybe I'll drink, right? I'll void my thoughts with drinking. But my body's deteriorating, and we waffle all these different ways. But eventually, after enough rolls of the dice, we get the scent. And when we get the scent, we follow the scent because of the underlying drive. We all want to go home. We all want to feel sustainably better. And there's only one mathematical way to do that. You cannot feel the healing of the separation from and longing for while investing in isolating, separating thoughts. One cannot do it. And so it must evolve. The binary system of good and bad, you and me, must evolve into we. The fight, flight, freeze of the reptilian brain must evolve into the awareness of the limbic brain, into the observation of the rational brain, into the integrity of the empathic brain with its partnering and the synergy of the transcendent brain, because it's more fun, because the possibility field is bigger in that domain. Joy plus fun is fun. It's where it all ends up. It's fun because it's fun. We want to have fun. It's more fun to love than it is to hate. It's more fun to create and to give than it is to take. It's more fun. And so every intelligent being, in fact, the measure of intelligence is the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. Love is more sustainable than hate or revenge. So you have a measure of intelligence. We enter the system of egoic consciousness with language. We imprison ourselves in the prison and prism of our beliefs and our thoughts, shoved and offered to us by our cult. We go round in circles on a bumpy ride, figuring out how to make it smoother, how to make it smoother, how to make it smoother, returning eventually to the symmetry. The circle of which we were once unconsciously a part, we're now consciously a part of with language. And then ultimately the greatest healing, the greatest gift, the greatest love, the greatest birth, which is death, the moving beyond, and the visitations of the transcendent realm, which are entering those states of ecstasis, of ecstasy, those states of ecstasy, through dance, through ritual, through lovemaking and tantra, through psychedelic journeys and voyages, through meditation, through questioning the beliefs that imprison us in dark cells, in frightened rooms, in isolated moments in time. To disbelieve, to question, to invite a going outward, we move beyond the system that separates us from who we are as moving, shifting patterns of energy in a vast, multidimensional ecology of which we are inextricably a part, that we have never left, that we have only forgotten in the narrowing and narrowing of cult dogmas that deny the scientific reality of our belonging, of our innate part in all that is, the sphere, the possibility field that we never left, and that heals all suffering as we return to, by transcending the conscious mind that cannot grasp its full complexity. I'm Dane Rose, and this has been fun.